Snuggle down into your bed now, get nice and comfortable, and close your eyes. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a magical story about a very special place. Take a deep breath in and out. Perfect. Let's begin. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far away, there lived a young prince named Oliver. He was 8 years old, with messy brown hair and a curious heart. Oliver loved exploring the castle gardens, climbing the old oak trees, and watching the clouds drift by. But Oliver had trouble sleeping at night. While everyone else in the castle drifted off to sleep easily, Oliver would lie awake, his mind full of thoughts and questions and wonderings. One night, when the full moon shone brightly through his window, Oliver noticed something peculiar. A small door had appeared in the stone wall of his bedroom, a door he'd never seen before. It was made of silver wood and glowed softly in the moonlight. Oliver climbed out of bed and walked toward the door. When he touched the handle, it felt warm and welcoming. He pulled it open, and instead of seeing the hallway outside his room, he saw something incredible. Beyond the door was a completely different world. A world made entirely of soft moonlight and gentle shadows. A world where everything moved slowly and peacefully, like being underwater, but able to breathe perfectly. Without hesitation, Oliver stepped through. The moment Oliver stepped through the doorway, he found himself standing in a forest unlike any he'd ever seen. The trees were tall and graceful, with silver bark that shimmered and leaves that looked like they were made of crystal. When the breeze moved through them, they made a sound like wind chimes, soft and musical. The ground beneath his feet was covered in moss that glowed with a pale blue light, and tiny flowers grew everywhere, flowers that opened only at night, their petals white and luminous. Oliver walked deeper into the forest, and as he walked, he noticed the creatures that lived there. There were rabbits made of starlight, hopping silently between the trees. There were deer with antlers that sparkled like diamonds, grazing peacefully in the clearings. Birds with feathers of silver and gold perched in the branches, their eyes half closed, content and calm. None of the animals seemed afraid of Oliver. In fact, they barely seemed to notice him, as if children visiting this magical place was the most natural thing in the world. As Oliver walked, he came upon a stream. But this wasn't a normal stream. The water wasn't water at all, but flowing light. It moved gently over smooth stones, creating a soft, babbling sound that was incredibly peaceful. The light water glowed in shades of blue and silver, and when Oliver knelt down and dipped his hand in it, it felt cool and tingly, like touching a cloud. He followed the stream as it wound through the forest, listening to its gentle song. The sound made him feel calm and drowsy in the best possible way. The stream led him past willow trees, whose branches hung down like curtains of silk, swaying gently even though there was barely any breeze. Underneath the willows, he saw sleeping foxes curled up in balls of soft orange fur, and badgers snoring peacefully in their dens. Everything in this forest seemed to be resting, dreaming, at peace. After following the stream for a while, Oliver came to a place where the forest opened up into enormous gardens. These gardens stretched as far as he could see, filled with flowers of every color imaginable. But all of them glowed softly with their own inner light. Purple flowers that shimmered like jewels. Pink ones that looked like they were made of rose quartz. Yellow ones that glowed like tiny suns. And blue ones that reminded Oliver of the ocean on a sunny day. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, there were butterflies. But these weren't ordinary butterflies. These were the most beautiful butterflies Oliver had ever seen. Some had wings that looked like stained glass windows, with patterns of every color imaginable. Others had wings that seemed to be made of pure light, changing colors as they flew, from blue to purple to green to gold. Some butterflies were as small as Oliver's thumbnail, while others were as large as dinner plates, floating through the air like slow-moving dreams. The butterflies danced through the gardens in graceful patterns, landing gently on flowers, then lifting off again in spirals and loops. They moved so peacefully, so calmly, that just watching them made Oliver feel relaxed and happy. Oliver walked through the gardens, and butterflies landed on his shoulders, his arms, even on top of his head. Their wings tickled just a little bit, and he could feel a gentle warmth coming from them, like tiny rays of sunshine. In the center of the garden stood an enormous tree. Its trunk was as wide as a house, and its branches spread out like a giant umbrella, covered in leaves that glowed with a soft golden light. Hanging from every branch were what looked like lanterns, but when Oliver looked closer, he saw they were actually cocoons. Hundreds and hundreds of cocoons, each one glowing from the inside with its own gentle light. Oliver knew that inside each cocoon, a caterpillar was transforming into a butterfly, resting peacefully while the magic happened. It was the quietest, most peaceful thing he'd ever seen. As Oliver stood beneath the great tree, looking up at all the glowing cocoons, he noticed someone sitting on one of the lower branches. It was a fairy, but not the kind of fairy from most stories. This fairy was about the same size as Oliver, with dark blue skin covered in tiny silver freckles that looked like stars. Her hair was long and white, flowing down her back like a waterfall, and she wore a dress that seemed to be made of shadows and moonbeams woven together. She was watching Oliver with eyes that were kind and gentle, and when she smiled, her whole face lit up with warmth. The fairy floated down from the branch and stood in front of Oliver. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him with those kind eyes, as if she could see right into his heart and knew exactly what he was thinking and feeling. Then she reached out and took Oliver's hand. Her hand was cool and soft, like holding a flower petal. Without speaking, she began to walk, gently pulling Oliver along with her. They walked through more gardens, past fountains that sprayed light instead of water, creating rainbow arcs in the air. They passed ponds where silver fish swam in slow, lazy circles, creating ripples that sparkled. They walked by hedges shaped like animals, sleeping lions, resting elephants, dozing bears, all perfectly still and peaceful. Eventually, the fairy led Oliver to a small village. But this wasn't a village for people. It was a village for all the things that needed to rest and sleep. There were little houses made of soft moss and flower petals, and inside each house, something was sleeping peacefully. In one house, tired old teddy bears rested on tiny beds, their worn fur patched and mended, their button eyes closed. In another house, books that had been read so many times their pages were soft, slept on small shelves, their stories dreaming themselves over and over. In another, there were toys that children had outgrown, wooden trains, tin soldiers, cloth dolls, all resting peacefully, remembering the games they'd played and the children who had loved them. There was a house where old songs slept, waiting to be remembered and sung again. A house where forgotten words rested, hoping someone would use them someday. A house where lost socks finally found their partners and could rest together at last. Everything here was peaceful and content. Nothing was sad about being old or forgotten. They were all just resting, dreaming happy dreams, knowing they had served their purpose well. The fairy led Oliver to a particular house at the end of a winding path. This house was made of soft gray clouds that looked solid enough to touch, with a door made of smooth driftwood and windows that glowed with the gentlest amber light. The fairy opened the door and gestured for Oliver to look inside. Inside the cloud house was a room filled with comfortable cushions and pillows of every size and color. And sitting on those cushions and pillows were worries. Yes, actual worries. They looked like small, fuzzy creatures, some round and plump, some thin and spindly, some with too many eyes, some with none at all. Each worry was a different color, depending on what kind of worry it was. Blue worries about things that might happen. Gray worries about things that did happen. Purple worries about what other people thought. Green worries about being good enough. But here in this room, all the worries were sleeping. They weren't bothering anyone or making anyone nervous. They were just resting peacefully on their cushions, snoring tiny little snores. The fairy walked into the room and picked up one of the worries, a small blue one with too many legs. She held it gently, like you might hold a sleepy kitten, and it made a soft purring sound. Then she did something magical. She breathed on the worry, and as her breath touched it, the worry began to shrink. It got smaller and smaller until it was no bigger than a marble. Then she placed it in a jar on a shelf with hundreds of other jars, each containing a tiny sleeping worry. The fairy turned to Oliver and smiled, and even though she never spoke a word, Oliver understood what she was showing him. Worries don't have to be scary. Worries can sleep. Worries can get smaller. Worries can be put away in jars where they can't bother you. Oliver felt something inside his chest relax and let go. He hadn't even realized he'd been holding on to anything, but now it was gone, and he felt lighter and calmer than he had in a very long time. The fairy took Oliver's hand again and led him out of the village. They walked up a gentle hill covered in soft grass that felt like silk beneath Oliver's feet. At the top of the hill stood one more tree, the most beautiful tree Oliver had seen yet. This tree had bark that looked like it was made of polished pearl, glowing with soft pink and blue and lavender colors. Its branches were thick and strong, and they curved in ways that created perfect little nooks and spaces. In the largest of these nooks, about halfway up the tree, was an enormous nest. But this wasn't a bird's nest. It was far too big for that. It was made of soft grasses and downy feathers, silk ribbons and flower petals, all woven together in the most comfortable-looking bed Oliver had ever seen. The fairy pointed to the nest, then to Oliver, then to the nest again. This nest was for him. Oliver climbed up the tree easily. The bark had natural handholds and footholds, as if the tree had grown that way on purpose. When he reached the nest and climbed inside, he discovered it was even more comfortable than it looked. The bottom was cushioned with layers and layers of the softest materials, and the sides curved up just enough to make him feel safe and protected, like being hugged by the tree itself. He lay back and looked up through the branches. Above him, the sky was filled with stars. But these stars were different. They were moving slowly, drifting like snowflakes, creating patterns in the air, spirals and circles and flowing streams of light. The fairy climbed up and sat on a branch near Oliver's nest. She began to hum, not with her voice, but with her whole being. The humming was like a feeling more than a sound, warm and soothing and gentle. As Oliver lay in the nest, wrapped in softness and warmth, watching the stars drift and dance above him, listening to the fairy's wordless song, he felt his eyes growing heavy. The nest seemed to rock gently, even though there was no wind. Everything was peaceful. Everything was safe. Everything was exactly as it should be. Oliver's eyes closed, just for a moment, just to rest them. And when they closed, he began to dream. He dreamed he was floating on a river of starlight, drifting slowly, peacefully, going nowhere in particular, but feeling perfectly content. The river carried him through gardens and forests, past sleeping animals and glowing flowers, under bridges made of rainbows, and through tunnels made of soft clouds. He felt lighter and lighter, as if he was made of nothing but air and light and peace. All the heaviness he'd been carrying, all the thoughts and questions and wonderings that kept him awake at night, all of it drifted away, like leaves on water, floating downstream, disappearing into the distance. The river eventually brought Oliver back to a familiar place, his bedroom, his own comfortable bed, his own soft pillow. He was lying in his bed, covers pulled up to his chin, the moonlight streaming through his window. Had he been asleep this whole time? Had it all been a dream? He couldn't quite tell, and somehow it didn't matter. What mattered was how he felt: calm, peaceful, ready for sleep. Oliver looked over at the stone wall where the silver door had appeared, but it wasn't there anymore. Just the regular wall, solid and ordinary. But on his bedside table, where there had been nothing before, now sat a small glass jar. And inside the jar was a single butterfly, glowing softly with golden light. The butterfly's wings opened and closed slowly, peacefully, as if it too was getting ready to sleep. Oliver smiled. He closed his eyes, snuggled deeper into his blankets, and let himself drift off into the deepest, most peaceful sleep he'd had in a very long time. And in his dreams, he walked through silver forests and butterfly gardens, held hands with a kind fairy, and rested in a nest made of starlight and love. And now, little one, just like Oliver, it's time for you to sleep. Close your eyes if they're not already closed. Snuggle deeper into your bed. Feel how comfortable you are, how safe and warm and peaceful. Let yourself drift off now into your own magical dreams. Tomorrow is waiting for you, but for now, just rest, just sleep, just dream. Good night, sweet child. Sleep well.